Going to be a good one. I've known Reid for some time now. He is one of the greatest backers of young talent in the Valley, and he picks them. Let's put it that way. He also happens to be a co-founder of LinkedIn, but his roots go way further back than that, including PayPal, part of that mafia that has, well, I mean that in a good way, and that has sort of spread out and created all sorts of value in our industry. Reid really did me a solid in flying back from a LinkedIn conference just in time to make it here on stage. So please join me in welcoming Reid to Web 2. You can sit over here on the couch. You're looking dapper. Did you get a haircut?
I did, actually.
Yes.
I have this very simple algorithm that when my hair starts really bothering me, I go schedule a haircut. And then you make it as short as possible that still, works. So,
Is it algorithm for hair cutting?
Yes, exactly.
Sounds like, I don't know if there's a company in there.
Probably not.
Probably not. Although I imagine that if someone came up with it with a pedigree, someone would fund it. So I wanted to start with the frame that we've been talking about data for three days, and you invest in a lot of companies. Almost all of them seem to be ones that leverage data in some way. LinkedIn, I think, with DJ Patil, who is now at Greylock, where you are. He was sort of the first data scientist of note in the Valley. Was there a moment when you said, "Oh my, this is how I need to look at the world," or was there a sort of an aha at some point?
Well, I think there's a set of ahas. Most of it comes down to really taking seriously when you project ubiquity. You say, okay, everyone's going to be online. Everyone's going to have their real identity. Everyone's going to have their real relationships. Everyone's going to have a smartphone in their pocket. What does that really mean? When is that going to happen? What are the ways that life changes because of that? And the data stuff actually came out of that because it started with me for the user. It started with me for the member who is engaging and what kind of value proposition they get and how do we connect with each other and how do we share, how do we navigate the world, how do we share experiences and all of that sort of thing in terms of all the investing on LinkedIn and everything else. And then you start saying, okay, well, what kinds of apps would you build after that? Like what can you, now that, if you're trending towards that ubiquity, what gets created? And obviously one of the things that happens when you have all of these people participating is you've got explicit data, things they put in their profiles, post to their, updates, all the rest of these things. You've got implicit data, which is kind of things that is derived from the activity. And then you've got, I actually don't really like the term data exhaust, but like analytic data in terms of what you can deduce from that. And then that allows you to build new applications which really can change how people navigate the world. And that's how I got into the whole data thing.
Can you give me an example on LinkedIn of something that got built based on that, deduction, based on that insight?
There's a lot of the products involve data. Matter of fact, probably nearly all. But maybe the clearest example is LinkedIn Skills. I don't know if you played with LinkedIn Skills yet, but basically
I don't have any, so I...
Yeah, the unskilled maybe actually skilled too. Basically, we went through the profiles and we figured out kind of what are terms that are skills and what are they co-current, what are they related to. We mashed that up with Wikipedia information, and then we created an index of all the different skills, which skill graph are they related to, the description from Wikipedia, which were they trending as a growing skill or a decreasing skill, what are skills related to, which companies, which regions, and all the rest of this thing. The kind of way that you can navigate this kind of thing is you're saying, well, what skills should I be learning? What skills are growing for talent management? If I'm managing the talent in my company, which skills should I be paying attention to? If these things, like for example, skill in Hadoop is important, what are the other things that are important, and should I be tracking?
So related skills.
Yes. Well, that's the skills graph. It's like what skills? If this skill, what are the skills around it, right? As a function of it.
And as I recall, when this came out, one of the things that at least I remember in the discussion around it was that there is almost a gap. There is a gap between the skills and the jobs that are demanding those skills and our workforce.
Yes.
Right? And LinkedIn as a sort of data platform is demonstrating that gap.
Yep. But it also, the idea is to empower the individuals so that people can say, okay, what skills should I be learning? What is that skill? What are those skills related to it? I mean, the obvious kind of iteration is, okay, well, how can I learn this skill? Right? Now that I've understood it, what are the pattern of learning it? What are companies that are ripe for that skill? What are regions? Which universities teach it? Right? Those kinds of things.
Right. Recently, well, not so recently, but earlier this year, you gave a talk at South by Southwest, and I was wondering if you could give us a recap of its thesis, because one of the things you said is, we need to get to Web 3. And
yep.
I'm right there with you. So give me a recap of the thesis.
Well, the very high line, and I wasn't trying to get too much into the naming debate, but I wanted to, South by Southwest, and this conference are great places to make kind of light, kind of send out a beam of light to say, hey, looking over here and inventing over here, creating, exploring, is something that can be massively generative. And the arc that I did was I said, look, Web 1.0 is search for files, whether they're HTML files, Flash files, etc., download them, look at them, interact with them. Interactivity was cyberspace. You had Anime Fan, an AOL chat room. Web 2.0 was participate with your real identity, your real relationships. Be who you are, but also navigate the world that we are in. So when I was thinking about what are the candidates for Web 3.0 and what the next major area, one of them is obvious. Everyone says it's mobile. Mobile is obviously extremely important. But then it's not really a useful light beam, right? Because you're like, okay, everyone knows that mobile is transforming, having a screen with us that's geolocated and
right.
real time. There's all kinds of transformation happens with that. However, the one that I thought wasn't getting enough focus was data. And it's the data that comes from what happens when everyone is participating in generating the data. Because when it's not just, like one of the phrases that's frequently used for this is big data. And yes, a lot of volume of high data helps you build better applications. But it's not just big data, it's semantically rich. Because since it's people and what they are expressing, like for example, LinkedIn skills, these are my skills, or how to navigate which movies you like, and these kinds of things, that then allows you to build apps on top of that is actually deeply relevant to how do we navigate the world. And so I wanted to kind of say, look, one of the things to consider for Web 3 is building kind of the implementation layer on top of the data as the next set of apps, whether it's on a mobile phone or whether it's on the web, are the things that we will have transformative, applications, value propositions, experiences, maps, and ways of navigating and moving, which is part of what life's about.
When you talk about big pools of data, it turns out, for good reasons or defensible reasons, or sometimes maybe not so good reasons, they're not very accessible. So you talk about LinkedIn skills, and the reason that I'm assuming was so successful is because you could go plug into a big pool of publicly available data
yep.
called Wikipedia,
yep.
right? And they're
LinkedIn profiles were pretty good too. But.
LinkedIn profiles didn't hurt,
yeah.
But only LinkedIn can really plug into those profiles at scale,
yep.
right? At the moment. What are your thoughts on how do we, really when we're talking about what's good for our society, how do we get these big pools of data to be, tapped into such that we can create this value?
Well, data always, data's complicating because, basically one of the things you have to be, so for a good service, you have to be members first, right? And so it's always about what is individual consent, control, trust, and these sorts of things. And, that goes by the description of what people frequently say is privacy, but it's really kind of value, not being ambushed, not being hurt, being enabled, feeling in control of what's going on, and all those things are really important. And so in the stack of what you were mentioning as good reasons, it's how do you navigate all of those? And the simplest way is, we have these value propositions we're providing. We're very clear. We hold trust, and it's consistent. The interesting question will be is, how do you move from that to having essentially places where people can participate in data, which is upside for every individual, and not downside, something that they feel like they're in control of,
right,
and that it works. And so right now, the way that's implemented is principally through primary services. But on the other hand,
now when you say primary services, you mean like Facebook,
LinkedIn, Facebook,
right?
etc. Now, but on the other hand, for example, one of the things that we think about, discussions internally at LinkedIn is, well, how do we make skills as a platform? So sure, we've derived all the skill information, as a function of, individual profiles, and we couldn't say, without participating in the service and your buy-in, like what your skills are and all the rest of the stuff, without, that being something you felt was in control. But now that we have here's what the skills are, here's what being a technology visionary or a conference guru or whatever, an entrepreneur, here's what these are, and here's how they tie to everything else. Well, that as now abstracted away from you and as its own now unique data set is actually something that could begin to fall into the categories where you could begin to have mashups that are interesting.
Right. I want to ask you to pretend we're not in front of hundreds of people, and pretend we're at an intimate dinner party, and I say to you, Reid, what's your real opinion of Facebook? You're an investor.
Does anyone ever answer these hypotheticals? Ignore the 1,000 people in the room? Is that a classic thing?
Didn't I just lull you into it? Well, I mean, because I just remember when Mark Zuckerberg was here last year, and he said social's going to be part of everything, and we're going to, every vertical is going to become socialized, and he even mentioned that one of them might just be, your work profile. That hasn't happened. LinkedIn's continued to really grow quite rapidly. You had a successful IPO, which we're going to get to. But, do you feel that Facebook is a competitor to LinkedIn? No.
No. I mean, so the high line is Facebook obviously is an amazing product that's gotten very big. Zuckerberg is intensely visionary about this and is, doing the best kind of entrepreneur product visionary, like I have a direction, here's where I'm going. And I've learned a bunch of things from both talking to Zuck and also watching Facebook. I'm not sure everything is social. Lots of important things are social. It's part of how life is meaningful. And I also distinguish between different aspects that we have in our life. Like I think there is the life we have with our friends, there's the life we have with our colleagues. I think it's a reason why, I'm at a conference in Vegas, which is the reason why in the jacket. That you present differently, you have different identities and different actually, even a different network in terms of how you're connecting these folks. So, Facebook has got a lot of great, huge things to do. So I've never really, I've always thought that they would be focused on, for example, say, current thing is revolutionizing the music industry. That sort of thing. And revolutionizing the music industry, the only way that LinkedIn thinks about that is talent. Right, well, okay, how do you put people together and how do you enable startups and how do you enable finance and all that sort of thing? How do you figure out which skill set, talking about skills, are the relevant skills in order to be a music professional? And so, my general view is it's great and it's amazing. I think we'll see really many things that are important to bring the people coefficient in, of which some of those will, a significant number of those will be Facebook. Part of what I believe is some of those will be LinkedIn. Actually, I think some of those will be Twitter, right? So, usually in this invention world, some of those will be a fourth thing that neither you or I know right now. It's one of the reasons I love the investing side of the business, because it's the creation of a new thing that's stunning and different and interesting and can change people's lives at the scale of hundreds of millions and can get to altitude.
Yeah. Before we get into your investing, because I'm very interested in that, I wanted to ask you about the IPO process. And it's been sort of in the air. It's getting harder, it strikes me from my vantage point as an entrepreneur, to go through the process of IPO. as you know, as Ben Horowitz said earlier, you know, we got out in 15 months in Netscape, right? You know, that just seems laughable now, and it probably should be laughable. But do you think that the market, you know, what's your view of the market right now in terms of it being open or closed or stormy for a quality company like LinkedIn to get out?
Ultimately, I think all quality companies that have a long-term focus can ultimately get out. I mean, the challenge is about a turbulent market is it's kind of door open today, door closed tomorrow, door open the next day. And so it ends up being a much more painful process. You take a bunch of time kind of just staying with it, going up and down as a way of doing it. One of the big challenges is, you know, the structural rules around it mean that you basically can't say anything in the press. And now we have this very large volume conversation around all of the companies.
Right.
And the longer you're going through that time period, the more weathering that is. Because, you know, one of the things that was, like, to give you an example of the kind of things that are interesting, like, for example, in the process of taking LinkedIn out, a Wall Street Journal story said, oh, yeah, Reid's selling $5 million of his stock to buy his next yacht. And I was like, oh, well, where's my first one? Like, you know, and the problem is you go through those as a company, and you just can't respond, right? And you can't talk to them. You can't clarify. You can't go fact checking and so forth. And I think that's part of what makes when you're in this kind of like, okay, are investors ready to go? Is the whole deal there? No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. You're still going through that turbulence that you can't respond to any of that stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it is. You know, we are currently, the public market technology is actually fairly, you know, I look at everything kind of in a technological lens, kind of old technology, and figuring out what the right rules should be, what the process should be, and so forth. I mean, it's probably relevant for someone to really think about what that should be.
Yeah.
I haven't given that a lot of thought yet because it is what it is.
Right.
You play the game as it is in front of you. But I think it is harder, and I think that, for example, a lot of the, you know, one of the expressions that I frequently like is a nation designed by engineers versus a nation designed by lawyers. And one of the key things is, okay, could we make this process a little bit better on the engineering, right? As opposed to, you know, because I think a lot of the Starbucks stuff actually just imposes tons of service costs on companies. And it's
Right.
Okay,
That certainly does keep the lawyers well paid.
Yes, and that's not where you have productive export. So,
what is your investment approach? You know, you recently joined Greylock. I was actually a little surprised to hear that because I didn't think you really suffered for deal flow, but you have, you know, reasons for doing that. So why did you join Greylock?
well, the high line is I actually have this view about kind of how an entity, a firm, a venture firm, can be much, much more helpful to entrepreneurs across the entire stack of the kind of the earliest partnership to very late stage. And you specialize in being a software firm, consumer internet and enterprise. And you say, you know, these are the games we play. You know, of the 6 partners, 4 of them have founded companies. All 6 have been operating executives. All have driven companies in these directions. And how do you build a practice that is massive, like that is game changing? And so, for example, you brought up DJ earlier, and data, right? And one of the things is, you know, we all by having executing these companies, we're looking at this saying, well, data is really important. You know, how do we help across the entire portfolio of companies? And so, when I was having a conversation with DJ, I was like, look, I think there's this new position of data scientists and residents that needs to be created that can actually help across this entire portfolio. And we were talking about it, he said, oh, I could do that. I'm like, yeah, of course you could. This was, we were having the conversation, and you know, he's at Greylock now for that purpose. And so, and to be able to build an organization that has those capabilities. And you know, part of what Greylock was a very natural fit. It's you know, it's got folks that I would co-found a venture firm with anyway. You know, David Z was a very early board member and important to me, and Anil Busri, you know, in my experience, is the best guy in cloud. And so you just got this this enormous ability of founders and operators to say, yes, we're interested in building something that's categorically different that can change the game in terms of how we do software companies. And that's the attractant. Deal flow is, Greylock had great deal flow. I have great deal flow. Deal flow wasn't the variable. The variable was how do you work with companies in really powerful ways.
Okay. So what companies have you invested in since you joined?
Since I joined, Airbnb, Shopkick, Viki, Groupon.
Quiet period.
Yes, quiet period.
Just thought I'd say that for you.
Thank you. I figured you were going to come with a question that was going to be my answer.
We have time for one or two questions if there are
Trial
any.
pay.
Trial pay? Mm-hmm. They were here. We have time for one or two questions. Yes. if anyone wants to bring it up. While we wait to see if anyone comes to the mics, we were discussing backstage, you're saying, what's that new book you're writing, John? And I was telling you about it, and you said, I'm coming out with a book. I guess you've already written it.
We are working on the galleys.
Congratulations. I'm a tiny bit envious. Tell us what it is.
So the book is called The Startup of You, and for the people who are curious about it, it's both on Amazon and also Tom Friedman wrote a column about it in the summer. And the basic idea is that every individual now needs to lead their life like an entrepreneur creates companies. And it's not that they create a company, but all the variables that apply to companies and entrepreneurial companies apply to individuals in their careers. So not just what is your brand, but how do you take risk intelligently? How do you do planning? How do you think about the set of assets how do you invest in yourself as a way of increasing your business value? And all of those things, that skill set is what entrepreneurs do. And so a version, kind of a intellectualized, kind of a theoretical framework plus some tangible specifics on here's things that entrepreneurs do that are useful for individuals. And it's called The Startup of You.
I look forward to reading it.
I hope it's good.
Question, yeah, here.
Oh, Fred.
Is that Fred?
Hey, guys.
Hey, Fred.
Fred Vogelstein, Wired. How are you? So, Reid, what is the difference between the way you are thinking about venture investing now at Greylock compared to sort of the more traditional model? I ask because I always thought that the value of a VC partner was his Rolodex. It sounds like you're sort of saying effectively the same thing, but I know it's different.
Well, so it's helpful to answer those questions being specific. So let's take DJ and data science, right? So we do events around data. DJ is, I think, we've exhausted him by having him meet with every portfolio company in terms of how he built, a data team. He actually published a booklet with O'Reilly on building data science teams. There's kind of a setup. What you basically do is part of how you think about it is you build in functions into the practice of the firm that are massively beneficial to the companies and also should be beneficial to when we look at things. So not only does DJ go out to the companies, but like, for example, when we're looking at a company where data is intrinsic to the strategy, we bring him in, meet with the company, we talk to him and say, look, do you think this will work? What do you think the competitive landscape looks like? Now that part of the due diligence part of what's VC, what I would think of as early venture, but the notion of actually having the firm be a platform that is substantially more help, the individual partner still has help, but the firm builds a platform that has the help that is part of it. And DJ is an example.
Thanks.
Sorry, is it going to follow? You look like you want to have a follow-up question.
I decided what I was going to ask was that the difference between the firm versus, so it's just the difference between the firm and the individual.
Well, you're adding to the individual. So platforms are always about amplifying. So I think network's also a platform. It's an amplification. So how do you amplify the value that you're providing? And there's a set of things that I think are most of the reason many incubator ideas tend to not be good ideas because what they try to provide a platform for is not instrumental to the 10xing a company. So shared office space, not instrumental. Shared HR practice and payroll, not instrumental. Those things are commodities, doesn't matter. What really matters is how can the company actually get to real serious elevation? How can it address key problems? And so you want those things to be in the platform of what you're doing on the venture firm. right? So, there's stuff you do with talent and recruiting. There's stuff you do with things like data when you think it's a universal thing across a large number of companies, hence the data scientists and residents, that sort of thing.
Great, thanks.
Over here.
Hello, Neff Hudson from USAA. You've been criticized in some quarters, mainly from competitors, for your approach to sharing user data on the LinkedIn network. And I was wondering...
think only from competitors, yeah. And from one in particular.
Yeah, one very loud competitor. So, but that said, what is your feelings on sort of the privacy debate and how it's going to play out in the employment space in particular?
Well, that particular quotation was, I said that privacy concerns tend to be old folks' concerns. The next sentence was that a lot of teenagers put their cell phones on their profiles, right? Which was the specific thing that I was talking about there, which was then seriously mischaracterized. And, my feeling is the issue is you got to put members first. You got to always provide value, and you got to never ambush them. You got to make sure that they have controls, that they have clarity about what you're doing, transparency, what you're doing, and that you're consistent over time. And that's how you navigate that issue. And what you do internally to the company is you may have, kind of things that you don't publish that you're doing because they're part of a competitive strategy and that kind of thing. But if everything you're doing should be able to be published on the front page of the New York Times, and you should be able to hold up your head with your friends. That's what I think.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm David Carr with Information Week. I've had conversations with a couple of different startup companies that are building professional social networks that are either applications embedded in Facebook or connected with Facebook in some way. And their argument for why that makes sense is that LinkedIn is for old people. It is for people who are in their 40s and older.
Like people who'd give you a job?
Right.
Yeah.
But the argument is that the folks coming out of college have established their social identities on Facebook. They're comfortable on Facebook. They see no reason to establish an identity on a service such as LinkedIn. And so the recruiters who are looking for the hot young guns are going to eventually migrate towards professional social networking on Facebook rather than LinkedIn. So what does LinkedIn need to do, if anything, to attract a younger demographic?
Well, we have a lot of younger demographic joining, and our growth rate is, I can't announce anything we haven't announced, but it continues to grow, and it's over 2 members per second. So, that's the truth. The truth is
Do
the
you
facts.
integrate Facebook Connect? I feel like I ask everyone this question.
I don't think so today.
No. That would be one way to fix it. I sound like I'm pimping Facebook Connect, but I'm not. I'm just pimping data portability.
Yeah.
Mac McCarthy, Zenergo. How you doing, Reid? My daughter is on LinkedIn, by the way. She's just out of college and starting her career, and she sees the career linkage opportunities. A lot of startup companies, they'll reach a certain point in their early evolution and then need to do a pivot as they hit a wall and need to shift gears and so on. Now, LinkedIn seems like a pretty clear, straightforward idea, social networking for business people. Did you have a pivot point that you had early on between your original vision and where you ended up?
No, LinkedIn actually, most startup companies go through pivot points. LinkedIn has actually maintained amazingly steady towards its original vision. And I was actually reminded of this because about 1.5 years ago, I think it was, we won the HBS, kind of Entrepreneurial Company of the Year award. And our first VC investor, a guy named Mark Kwame, went and introduced us on stage, and he put up the financial projections that we had as to what our revenue would be per year. And they basically ended up being what the first 4 years were. It was like what we had predicted was actually right. And I think that may have been more dumb luck, right? But it was still kind of like, whoa, that's cool. And part of it is you have to make a decision about, one of the challenges in vision is you have to make a decision about whether or not you're a visionary or a madman. And because you get early data, right? And sometimes if the data is positive, it's easy. If the data is negative or slow, like, for example, LinkedIn grew through, there were a couple years where there was years of Friendster, and then there was the launch of the Facebook platform, where the Facebook platform was going to be everything. I looked at the Facebook platform, I thought, oh, this is going to be games. I invested in Zynga and joined the board. The thing that you have to do is you have to say, look, I actually am really certain that this will play out over time, and I'm going to keep on that focus. Now, part of the thing that's given as advice to entrepreneurs, I've said this in other contexts, but it's worth repeating. There's a bunch of pieces of kind of conflicting pieces of advice, like persistence and flexibility. So have a vision, keep going, ignore the data. Flexibility, listen to the data, listen to customer change. And how you integrate those is a question of, look, am I right in my theses about what's going on? I got to be paranoid. I got to be constantly listening to, is it possible I'm wrong? Do I need to pivot? Is there something additional that I'm learning? And then pivot. And you use judgment and intelligence as a way of blending those together in terms of the specific case.
So be confident, but keep checking.
Paranoid survive, a la Andy Grove, is a very good quote.
Well, thank you for your questions, and Reid, thank you very much for coming back from your conference to help end ours. So
always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Reid Hoffman.
Thank you.
Go right up here.